If you are over 60 and you think you are doing everything right, I want you to stop for just a moment, because there are habits so small, so ordinary, so woven into your daily life that you do not even notice them anymore. And yet these very habits are quietly working against you, chipping away at your health, your independence, and your peace of mind, one ordinary day at a time. And the scary part is that none of these mistakes feel like mistakes while you are making them. They feel like just living. They feel like just getting through the day. And that is exactly why they are so dangerous, because you cannot fix what you refuse to see. And today we are going to shine a light on 7 of these silent mistakes, the ones nobody warns you about, the ones your doctor does not always have time to mention in a 15-minute appointment, the ones your own children might not even notice because they are not standing beside you at 7 in the morning when you get out of bed too fast, or at noon when you skip a meal because you are simply not hungry, or at midnight when you tell yourself that 6 restless hours of sleep is good enough. So let us start right where so many people start losing ground without ever realizing it, and that is with the way they get out of bed in the morning, because here is something most people never think about. When you have spent 7 or 8 hours lying down, your blood pressure naturally drops, and if you spring up out of bed the way you did when you were 30, the way your body used to handle without complaint, that sudden change in position can cause a sharp drop in blood flow to your brain. And this is one of the leading silent causes of dizzy spells. And dizzy spells are one of the leading silent causes of falls. And falls, as you probably already know deep down, are one of the single biggest threats to independence after the age of 60. Not because falling itself is always catastrophic, but because the recovery afterward can steal months or even years of strength and confidence that never fully come back. So mistake number 1, rising too fast in the morning, might sound almost too simple to matter, and yet doctors who specialize in geriatric care will tell you this single change: learning to sit on the edge of the bed for a full 30 to 60 seconds before standing, giving your circulatory system time to catch up, prevents more injuries than almost any supplement or exercise program you could buy. And the reason this mistake is so silent is because it does not hurt you the first time or the 10th time or even the 100th time. It simply waits quietly for the one morning your body is a little more tired, a little more dehydrated, a little more vulnerable than usual, and that is the morning it finally catches up with you. And now let us talk about mistake number 2. And this one might surprise you because it hides behind something that looks like independence and strength. And that is the habit of skipping meals or eating very small, irregular meals, because appetite naturally decreases with age. Your taste buds change, your sense of smell dulls, cooking for one can feel like too much effort. And so many people over 60 quietly begin eating less without ever making a conscious decision to do so. It simply happens gradually. A smaller breakfast here, a skipped lunch there, a bowl of cereal standing in for dinner. And because weight loss is not always dramatic or sudden, this slow decline in nutrition slips under the radar for months, sometimes years. And the truth is that adequate protein and steady, regular meals are what maintain muscle mass. And muscle mass after 60 is not just about looking strong. It is directly tied to your balance, your metabolism, your immune function, and even your mental sharpness, because your brain runs on stable blood sugar. And when you skip meals, your energy crashes, your thinking gets foggy, your mood dips, and you may not even connect these symptoms back to the fact that you simply have not eaten enough today. So the second silent mistake is treating food as an afterthought instead of as one of the most important tools you have for staying strong, staying sharp, and staying independent. And just like the first mistake, this one does not announce itself. There is no single dramatic moment where skipping a meal knocks you off your feet. Instead, it is death by 1,000 small decisions, each one seeming harmless in isolation, but adding up over months into measurable muscle loss, weakened bones, and a body that is simply less equipped to bounce back when illness or injury eventually does arrive. And I want you to really sit with that idea for a second, because so much of what damages us after 60 is not one big catastrophic event. It is not usually a single terrible decision. It is the slow accumulation of dozens of tiny choices made every single day without a second thought, choices that feel completely reasonable in the moment. And this is precisely why awareness matters so much more now than it did when you were younger, because your body has less margin for error than it used to, less ability to absorb neglect and bounce back unscathed, which means the small stuff that you could once shrug off now genuinely counts. And if that thought makes you a little uncomfortable, good, because that discomfort is exactly what is going to help you catch yourself tomorrow morning when you go to jump out of bed too quickly, or tomorrow afternoon when you consider skipping lunch because you are not really hungry. And in the next part, we are going to dig into 5 more of these silent mistakes, some of them involving the very people you talk to every day. And one of them so common that almost everyone watching this is doing it right now without even realizing it. Now let's talk about mistake number 3. And this one is going to sting a little because it involves something almost every person over 60 does with the best of intentions, and that is withdrawing from social contact without ever meaning to, because it rarely happens as a conscious choice. Nobody wakes up one day and decides to become isolated. Instead, it creeps in slowly. A friend moves away, a spouse passes. Driving at night starts to feel less comfortable, so you stop going out after dark. The grandchildren get busy with their own lives, and the weekly visits become monthly, then occasional, and each of these changes seems small and reasonable on its own, completely understandable given the circumstances. But the cumulative effect is that many people over 60 end up going days, sometimes even a full week, with barely a real conversation, just a quick exchange with a cashier or a passing nod to a neighbor. And here's what almost nobody tells you: loneliness is not just an emotional discomfort, it is a measurable physical health risk. Researchers compared the health impact of chronic loneliness to smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. It raises inflammation throughout the body. It weakens immune response. It is linked to higher rates of cognitive decline and even earlier mortality. And the reason this mistake is so silent is that isolation feels peaceful at first. It feels like rest, like finally having quiet time after decades of busy family life and demanding careers, so it does not register as a problem. It registers as relief, right up until the day you realize you cannot remember the last time you laughed out loud with another human being in the same room. And by then the habit of staying home, of not reaching out, of assuming people are too busy for you, has become so entrenched that breaking it feels almost impossible, which is exactly why the fix has to be small and deliberate. 1 phone call a day, 1 standing weekly commitment, whether that is a class, a place of worship, a walking group, anything that puts you in regular contact with other living, breathing people, because connection is not a luxury at this stage of life. It is maintenance. Every bit as necessary as taking your medication or eating your vegetables. And now let's move to mistake number 4, which is closely related but distinct enough to deserve its own moment. And that is neglecting mental stimulation in favor of passive entertainment. And I want to be very careful here, because I am not telling you to feel guilty about watching television. That is not the point at all. The point is about balance, because your brain, just like your muscles, operates on a use it or lose it principle. And when the majority of your waking hours are spent passively absorbing content, watching the same channels, scrolling the same feeds, following the same predictable routines, your brain is not being asked to do very much active work. It is coasting, and a brain that coasts for years at a time gradually loses some of its sharpness, not because of disease, but simply because of disuse, the same way an unused muscle atrophies. And this matters enormously because cognitive engagement, things like reading, doing puzzles, learning a new skill, playing a musical instrument, even engaging in a genuinely challenging conversation, has been shown again and again in research to help preserve memory and processing speed as we age. It will not guarantee you avoid every form of cognitive decline. Nothing can promise that, but it absolutely stacks the odds in your favor. And the silent danger here is that passive entertainment feels productive. It feels like you are doing something. Your eyes are open. Your brain is technically receiving information, so it does not feel like neglect. But there is a real difference between information washing over you and your brain actively reaching out to solve a problem, recall a fact, or create something new. And that difference is exactly what determines whether your mind stays flexible or gradually stiffens up. And this brings us to mistake number 5, one of the most overlooked of them all, and that is ignoring changes in balance and gait, meaning the way you walk, because so many people notice that they have started walking a little more carefully, taking the stairs a little slower, holding the railing a little tighter, and they simply chalk it up to getting older, an inevitable and unremarkable part of aging that does not need to be mentioned to anyone. But here is the truth that geriatric specialists wish more people understood. Changes in balance and walking speed are not just a normal side effect of aging to be silently endured. They are often one of the earliest and most reliable predictors of fall risk, and sometimes even an early signal of underlying issues with vision, inner ear function, blood pressure regulation, or nerve function in the legs and feet. And because these changes happen gradually day by day, week by week, the person experiencing them adapts without ever registering just how much has actually shifted. The same way you do not notice a room slowly getting darker as the sun sets until you suddenly realize you can barely see. And this is exactly why so many falls seem to come out of nowhere to the people who experience them, when in reality the warning signs were there for months, quietly ignored, dismissed as just part of getting older. And the fix here does not require anything dramatic. It simply requires paying attention, noticing if you have started avoiding certain movements, if you feel less steady turning quickly, if you have started using furniture to steady yourself around the house without really thinking about why, and bringing these observations to a doctor rather than assuming they are too minor to mention. Because catching these changes early opens the door to balance training, physical therapy, or simple home safety adjustments that can prevent the very falls people are so afraid of. Back and around, pull out. And in the next part, we are going to cover the final 2 mistakes, including one final habit tied to sleep that almost everyone gets wrong, plus something involving medication management that could genuinely be a matter of life and death. Now let's get into mistake number 6, and this one hides inside something everybody assumes they already understand, and that is sleep, because most people over 60 believe that needing less sleep, or sleeping more lightly, or waking up 2 or 3 times during the night is simply an unavoidable part of getting older, something to accept and work around rather than something to actually address. And while it is true that sleep architecture does change with age, that does not mean poor sleep should simply be tolerated as the new normal, because chronic fragmented sleep, night after night, year after year, has real and measurable consequences. It is linked to weakened immune function, slower physical recovery, increased risk of falls due to daytime grogginess, higher rates of anxiety and depression, and even accelerated cognitive decline. And yet so many people quietly adapt their entire day around bad sleep. Instead of trying to fix it, they start relying on caffeine to get through the morning. They take long naps in the afternoon that then make nighttime sleep even harder to achieve. They lie awake at 2 in the morning scrolling on a brightly lit phone screen, telling themselves this is just how it is now. And the silent part of this mistake is that poor sleep does not always feel like an emergency. It feels like mild chronic tiredness that you learn to function around. So it never gets flagged as something worth solving, right up until the exhaustion catches up with your immune system or your mood or your memory, and you cannot quite trace the decline back to its actual source. And here is what almost nobody tells people over 60. Disrupted sleep is not something you simply have to accept. There are real practical fixes. Keeping a consistent wake-up time every single day regardless of how the night went. Getting natural sunlight exposure within the first hour of waking to help regulate your internal clock. Limiting screens for at least 30 minutes before bed. And being honest with a doctor about sleep problems rather than assuming they are just a normal and unfixable part of aging. Because sometimes what looks like ordinary age-related sleep disruption is actually something treatable, like sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, or a medication side effect. And this leads us directly into the 7th and final silent mistake, and in many ways it is the most serious one on this entire list, and that is mismanaging medications. Not through negligence or carelessness, but simply through the sheer complexity that builds up over years, because it is extremely common for someone over 60 to be taking 4, 5, 6, or even more medications at once, prescribed by different doctors for different conditions, sometimes without any single person having a complete picture of everything being taken together. And this creates a silent and genuinely dangerous risk of drug interactions. Duplicate medications under different brand names, incorrect dosages that were never adjusted as kidney or liver function changed with age, or simply confusion about which pill to take when. Especially when pill bottles look similar or daily routines get disrupted by travel, illness, or a simple change in schedule. And what makes this mistake so dangerous is precisely that it is silent. There is no dramatic warning sign that you are accidentally doubling up on a blood thinner, no flashing signal that 2 of your medications are working against each other inside your body. The consequences simply build quietly until they manifest as a fall, a hospitalization, sudden confusion, or a health crisis that seems to come completely out of nowhere, but was in fact building for weeks or even months. And the single most powerful fix for this, one that geriatric specialists recommend again and again, is scheduling what is called a brown bag medication review, literally gathering every single medication and supplement you take, prescription and over-the-counter alike, into one bag, and bringing that bag to your doctor or pharmacist at least once a year so someone with full training can look at the complete picture all at once, rather than each medication being managed in isolation by a different specialist who cannot see the whole puzzle. And if you take nothing else away from this video, let it be this one habit, because it genuinely has the power to prevent some of the most serious health emergencies that happen to people over 60. And now that we have gone through all 7 of these silent mistakes, rising too quickly in the morning, skipping meals, withdrawing from social connection, relying too heavily on passive entertainment, ignoring subtle changes in balance and gait, tolerating chronic poor sleep, and mismanaging medications, I want you to notice the common thread running through every single one of them. None of these mistakes are dramatic. None of them feel urgent in the moment. None of them come with alarm bells attached. And that is exactly what makes them so dangerous, because the human mind is wired to respond to emergencies, to sudden pain, to obvious danger. But it is remarkably bad at noticing slow, gradual decline, the kind that unfolds one ordinary day at a time until suddenly, months or years later, you look up and realize how much has quietly changed. And the good news, the genuinely encouraging news, is that every single one of these 7 mistakes is completely within your power to correct. None of them require expensive treatments or drastic life changes. They simply require awareness, the willingness to look honestly at your own daily habits and ask whether you have been sleepwalking through decisions that deserve real attention. So if even one of these 7 mistakes struck a nerve today, do not just nod along and move on with your day. Pick one, just one, and commit to changing it this week, whether that means sitting on the edge of the bed for 60 seconds before standing tomorrow morning, calling a friend you have been meaning to reach out to, or finally scheduling that medication review you have been putting off, because small, consistent changes made now are what protect the independence, the sharpness, and the vitality you are going to want to hold on to for many years to come. And if this video helped you see something in a new light, share it with a parent, a neighbor, or anyone in your life who might need this reminder today, because sometimes the most important conversations start with someone simply catching a silent mistake before it catches them.